Okay, let's check out Jayden's stats here. HP's okay, AP's pretty good, 2 defense, 380 magic? Before we get into the usual should you pull video, we do need to address Jayden's magic stat, and it's low. There's no way around it. His base magic is 350, and just for reference, someone like Dark Fina has a base magic stat of 420. However, Dark Fina has a bunch of magic up from her board and from her master ability, and Jayden just doesn't have either of those things. His flat magic from his board is also pretty minimal, but he does have 349 dexterity, and his damage does scale partially off of his dex, just like all ranged units. Even more important than that, Jayden will sit comfortably at 60% spirit penetration and 70% missile resist penetration innately when he has his water gun diamond coat and VC equipped. With buffs, Jayden can reach 100% spirit penetration and 90% missile resist penetration, which is no joke. There's a lot of attackers with higher stats that will get mitigated a lot more by defense, spirit, and various resistances, and that will bring their damage down. Jayden doesn't have to worry about that type of mitigation. He'll punch right through, and there is an exception of things like barriers or shell, AoE, and single target resist, but he still stands a much better chance than a lot of other ranged attackers. So maybe there is some hope for Jayden after all. So let's take a look at his pros and his cons as we usually do in these videos. We're going to start by taking a look at Jayden's stats, and the big thing I want to draw attention to is, again, this massive missile resist and spirit penetration that he has innately, because you're going to be equipping him with his water gun, and even if you don't use the diamond coat, trust stones can get pretty close with missile resist penetration, so he's in a really good spot in terms of his innate penetrations, and that just sits him well for like any meta, right? Because he can just penetrate through these stats. Like, for example, we had this guild battle map with 50 defense up and a bunch of slash resist penetration. If there was a 50 spirit up map, yes, that would lower Jayden's damage, but he really wouldn't be that hamstrung by it. Now, he also has some other good stats. His accuracy is quite good compared to the regular Jayden, and he also has very good agility. He also has decent slash and missile resistances, and it's a good spot to build from if you're trying to make him not really durable, but just like survive more than one hit. Jayden also has some very good utility. Now, most of his skills are going to be the typical gunner skill that he needs that line of sight to actually hit his opponent, but he does have range height for skills. Just like the regular Jayden, he has one AoE, although it's a bigger AoE, it's the barrage, big AoE, and he has one single target that can be shot over across people. He also has a 100% hit skill with a dispel on it, so that's a really big deal. Jayden's, I need to clarify here, regular Jayden has a small potency 100% hit, and the fact that this one is a large potency, it does make a big difference because he can actually finish people off with it. And the fact that it has the dispel means it is going to strip other buffs off of these people. If they're a evasion unit that have used luck up or evasion up or any sort of agility up buff, then you're taking that off them, and it's just going to make your other units have a little bit higher chance of hitting these units if you haven't actually killed them. He's also got slow on his LB, which is pretty impactful. We saw that with Kane, how much that could actually affect the course of a match. He's got some other things like healing power down and counter chance reduction. Those are all really good to see as well, including a silence shot that I'm actually pretty interested in, but he does have, a case to be using that scholar sub as well. And then finally, his TMR is just very good. The fact that it has 2 uses, it can give 20% missile penetration rate to allies and himself. It's just if you get that, you're going to be using that on units for a long time, and not just him, just literally any ranged unit at all. We are going to do a damage calc at the end, so don't worry about that. So we'll just talk about some of the cons real quick. The first one is that there is no range up TP skill on his kit, so he needs to get that externally, whether it's from a TMR or maybe it's going to be from another gunner or ranged unit that can share a range up skill. not the biggest deal in the world, but it is something to keep in mind that he's going to be at a lower range than some of the other units that are out there, and sometimes you really do want that range up. So you have to think about how you want to give him access to that. The other thing that I kind of complain about with a lot of units is that it's going to be difficult to actually get this perfect scenario up where you have all of these penetrations, because he has good TP buffs and you can't use them all in one fight, especially with a ranged unit like him, because he will get into range faster than other units might. So for example, if you use his team buff, which gives agility and also a refresh for him, that's really good, but and the fact that it's a shared ability means that you might not get to your other abilities. So really, you might actually turn that off and instead get that spirit penetration and that magic buff up, because that's a really big deal. And then also get his TMR buff up. Or maybe you're going to be using bells, because I know that with units like the regular Jayden, with Cetia, like you're still wanting to use bells. Now we are going to look at an AP build later on to see if we can kind of forego that, but it is something that you have to keep in mind. The final thing that I want to talk about is the fact that he doesn't have a jamming thrust like skill that regular Jayden has. And this isn't as big a deal as it is with Jayden, but it still is a nice thing to have. So I'll just give you, if you don't know Jayden that well, on the regular Jayden's kit, he has jamming thrust on his red mage sub job, and it's kind of a big deal because when you run into somebody with high missile resist, then you can actually switch over to use that. But it's actually not really about attacking somebody with high missile resist. What it's actually good for is attacking people with low magic resist, because Jayden has some penetration, and this new Jayden has a lot of penetration, so he doesn't need to get an alternate attack type to get around missile resistance. He's pretty fine attacking through it. But what he does need to take advantage of at times, when you're attacking a unit like Englebert, sure, you can penetrate through his spirit and his missile resist, but you can't really compensate for when he has a negative 30% magic resistance. You just want to hit him with a quick jamming thrust. Now, Jayden does have some instant cast magic skills. He does have some castable magic skills on the Scholar sub job, but those are not as high potency. They either have low potencies or they have cast times. It's just not the same as having this high range, instant, high modifier skill that can just do a lot of damage really quickly. Now, Jayden does have one thing that's pretty interesting, which is the Law of Geo Absorption skill on the Scholar subjob. This is a strike attack which will hit a lot of people's weaknesses, and it also does not get affected by Runic Blade from Celis. So it is actually a very interesting skill for him. Now, the difference, or the kind of the important thing is that it does have a slow cast time. So that means that you might want to use the cast time reduction passive if you're really counting on using it, or maybe you use the cast time reduction TP skill, but then again, you're getting into this whole world of how do I get all of my TP skills off? Maybe you can address that when you build his runes out. It's up to you, but it is a very powerful skill. I'm not really worried about the heal so much, just the fact that it's this big modifier with a strike, magic-based strike attack, and that's something that Jayden can use if he gets into range of Celis. For this next section, I'd like to compare Jayden to the regular Jayden, but also to Cetia. So first off, compared to the regular Jayden, Summer Jayden is actually quite similar. Their kits have these two arcing shots. They're both around the same speed, and they both are magic missile damage dealers. However, Summer Jayden does edge the regular Jayden in quite a few ways. So for example, with his accuracy, with his better 100% hit shot, that's also a dispel. He's really not going to be any more durable than Jayden is, except for maybe versus slash attacks if you build up his resistances. But even then, with essentially, he's got 2 defense and 0 spirit, no AoE resistance. I guess, 10 AoE resistance with his VC. He's not really going to put up that much of a fight. He's not meant to be a bruiser. Both Jaydens have 20% AP consumption rate decrease. They both have probably the same AP issues. So in my experience, regular Jayden needs bells to be truly effective in guild battle. This often means turning March of the Stag off. It's a big deal to turn off a 60% magic buff, but he's still effective without it. Now, Summer Jayden's going to be wanting to use his magic buff because it's tied to the spirit penetration. So that's actually a big boost for him. I'm just trying to figure out how he can get Belle's spirit penetration and missile penetration buffs all off at the same time. You'll likely want to skip that agility up and AP refresh buff, as good as it is, for the extra damage penetration, although I could be wrong. Now we actually are going to look at an AP build where you don't use Belle's, and I think this could work for either Jayden. The one thing that you have to keep in mind though is that it's very map dependent. So for example, on the map that we had where we were on the staircases, that was a very difficult map for Jayden to use multiple TP buffs to actually build up some AP. So really, he needed Belle's to just go straight through and just continue to mow down opponents. I actually played against a lot of, it was Jayden, Fina, and the MR tank that I'm totally, Mariala, that was a very popular team. And I just crushed those teams with the magic tank because Jayden got 2 attacks and then was auto attacking or using Cura for the rest of the fight. And it was really weird that they weren't using Belle's on him, because he just, if he had continued to just sling attacks at me, they would have beat my teams. Now I also threw Cetia into this comparison because I think that she's one of those missile units that we've had that has some of the highest penetrations around because of her innate 40% missile resistance penetration, but also because she has decent defense penetration once you get her TP buffs off, like the target buff on her sniper sub job. And when you pair that with her fire and peril, she can do some really big damage even on maps where there's high defense, against targets with high defense and high missile resist on their kits. So I mean, I've tried to use other units, fire units, that have a better map advantage than her in terms of damage, and she still out damages them once she gets everything online. So when we compare Summer Jayden to her, we can see that he gains a lot of good stats over her, like way better agility, way better accuracy, better AP, but he does trade off with just that lower magic stat. So he's going to be dealing less damage than Cetia, but he has even more penetrations than she does. Let's take a very quick look at the VC here, and I say quick because honestly, if you're going to be pulling for Jayden, you're going to be pulling for this VC, and you can see why it's got decent stats, but it's got 3 agility on the card, which is quite good. The bestowed effect is some magic and missile resistance up, and then he gets missile attack and AoE resist specifically. But what's really important here is the party effect, where you get 35% missile resist penetration, and that's a really big deal. You also get some slash resistance, which is very welcome, and 50% acquired AP up, which Jayden really needs. So this is a very powerful card for wind counts in general, because there are a lot of wind missile units. We have Corwell and Lucia, the more obvious ones, but then there's More the Merrier and Sadly that also have magic scaling missile attacks. And the fact that you get 50% acquired AP up makes this really good as a sub VC, as that's one of the stats that gets least affected by being in the sub slot. So I think that a lot of wind accounts in general are going to want to pick this up, because it will be a seasonal card. We're going to get it again and again, and it will come back. But at the end of the day, it's one of those cards that will keep value for a long time, because giving a resistance penetration is a big deal. So I think that a lot of people will go for this regardless if they pull for Jayden or not. And if you're not in the wind element at all, then you're probably just going to skip this card. The other thing we should look at is the Hydro Pump Blaster, because it's really good. And I think that you'd likely build a magic or critical version. When you look at this gun, the effects that it gives Jayden are insane. So at a +5 level, it gives him 20% spirit penetration. It gives him 30% chance that counter doesn't activate, and then you get another 15 missile attack. And sorry, I missed it, but there's 20% dex, which is just more damage for Jayden. Now, unfortunately, this doesn't also activate for the regular Jayden, which is kind of a bummer, but still, this is a very, very powerful gun, and I highly recommend that you just farm 2 of them while it's up. You get a magic, you get a crit, and you just have both. If you're just going for one, then magic is probably the safest to go, so that you don't have to do more building around crit. But if you know what you're doing with critical, then you know what you're going to build anyway. Now I do want to mention that the Quasar gun is going to get a very nice +6, where it gets a high magic stat, and it also goes from 15 missile attack up to 25 missile attack up. It's still not going to be as good for Jayden as this Hydro Pump Blaster is, but in case you do miss this, although this does have that regular equipment farming event banner label on it, so I wonder if this will just come back through the Farplane exchange anyway. So I guess we'll see. All right, so I talked a little bit about doing an AP build for the runes, and the way that's going to look is that we'll build an AP and TP set on Jayden. So the AP set is going to give him more max AP, and that means that he'll start with more AP during the battle, and he will also decrease his AP consumption by 10. That is a set bonus. It doesn't stack with other sources. It basically puts him at 30% AP consumption down. We'll also give him a full TP set, which will give him a set bonus of 25% acquired AP up. That means it stacks with the acquired AP up on a Trust Stone or the Diamond Coat, and then also with the VC that he will obviously have equipped. So here is some Word document math that we've done. If you put together the acquired AP up from his VC, from the TP rune set, and also from the rune passive itself, we're not including the Diamond Coat. In this example, we'll use something else. You can actually get to 85% acquired AP up. And then like I said, we also have 30% AP consumption down. So when we have 48 starting AP, which he will in the build that I'm gonna show you, he can actually build up some AP by using his TP skills. So in this scenario, he is using his team missile resist penetration buff, and assuming he gets that off on everybody and then uses his magic up and spirit penetration buff, he will build 22 AP and then 20 more AP. This means that when he actually starts attacking, he has 90 AP already. That's a pretty high amount to start with. That's like one of those 50% AP units. Now this assumes a couple of things, right? It assumes that he's not in range already to start attacking. It assumes that he's not going to use his shared buff twice because he only hit one unit and then he has to hit the other unit with it. Either way, he's going to be at around this starting AP, but he's just not going to necessarily have all the buffs that we want him to have. But then when we look at some of the AP costs for his skills, his highest AP cost skill at 40 AP is Splash Shower, his big AoE, will only cost 28 when we have 30% cost down. And then his Maelstrom Jet, which is his other arcing skill, is going to be 19 AP. Now his LB actually does cost more AP. I'm just thinking of what's repeatable or not. So his LB does cost 34 AP, but either way, when you look at this, he could actually Splash Shower 3 times in a row. He could use Maelstrom Jet 4 or 5 times in a row, and he could use his LB and mix it in. So the fact that he could reliably use 3 AP skills in a row, is that good enough to get through a guild battle fight? Is that going to make a huge difference, where you can actually win the fight with him attacking 3 times, and then the next fight he'll do it again? Or does he need a 4th attack? And does that mean that he's going to need to then auto attack or TP buff depending on range? That could be the case. So this is where you can decide whether or not for you, like, is he going to be a Bells unit, or is he going to need to use his refresh? Because if he uses his skill with refresh, that actually puts him in an even better situation. The only problem is that you probably are not getting also the missile resist penetration or the magic up and the spirit penetration. Now you might be wondering why I did those calculations without the Diamond Coat and instead using Trust Stones. And the reason is that we might be using a different item on Jayden. So in this build, we're actually using the Producer's Bow Tie because that will allow him to stay a little bit further back. And hopefully this will accomplish 2 things. The first is that he will be able to use more TP skills to get all of his buffs online. The second reason is so that he doesn't get too far up and get killed. So I think that this is probably a better way to build him, and in this scenario we're actually using his own TMR and we're not using Bells. When we look at the vision cards, you can see this is kind of a bit of a defensive build in terms of getting that 20% single target and AoE resist up, getting some magic resistance up, but we're still using his VC, we're using an agility card. This is kind of like a general all-purpose build. When we look at his rune stones, it's the AP and the TP that I talked about, and I didn't even build out the defensive passives because that's not really important here. What's important is that we're using the 20% acquired AP up. We're using 20% magic from the rune chest stones. We're using 10% missile resist penetration. So we're losing 5 from the diamond coat and 10% acquired AP up from the diamond coat. But we're gaining the ability to equip the producer's bow tie or any other accessory or armor that you'd actually like to equip on him instead. We've also got some wind attack here, so this all looks fine. All right, so now we're going to take a look at some damage calculations, and the person that I've chosen to take all of these bullets is Rain, because he is a high spirit tank with good missile resistance, but he also has a magic barrier, and that might be a pretty good way of dealing with Jayden. The other thing that Rain has is a bunch of AoE resist, and we're going to demonstrate how that might actually affect Jayden. So in this scenario, Jayden does not have any extra killers. Jayden does not have any extra penetrations yet. We're just seeing what is with his innate penetrations, what kind of damage is he going to be doing. So we can see on the right that when he uses Maelstrom Jet, which is his powerful single target arcing attack, that we're looking at about 3,700 damage. Now if we switch over to the Splash Shower, his arcing AoE attack, it's only going to deal about 2,400, so a lot less, and that's partially because Rain has 50% AoE resist in this build, which is very reasonable for him to get to. The other thing that we should think about is that if Rain has his barrier up for 3 turns, or 3 hits, that all of these damages we're looking at would actually be halved. So Rain could actually deal with Jayden pretty easily. However, if we add our 40% spirit penetration, we're also getting 40% magic, and we're getting another 20% missile resist penetration. All of a sudden, when we use Splash Shower, we're heading up over 1,000 damage, because we're really getting through a lot of those things. Now he's still going to be, that's going to be cut in half, and he's going to deal less damage to someone with a barrier unless somebody else breaks it for him. But when we look at something like, again, his Maelstrom Jet, we're getting into the 6Ks now. So he's actually dealing a lot of damage to a very durable magic tank. Now, a lot of you might be thinking, wow, you picked Rain, who's, not exactly the front of the meta right now, so we can take a look at other units as well, but he's someone that's built pretty defensively here and is still taking a lot of damage, and he is someone that might be effective for dealing with Jayden if we do see a lot of Jaydens in PvP. This next target that I've selected is an Englebert that has pretty low spirit. He's got okay missile resistance, but he's got 30 faith, and he's wearing Fenrir so that he has access to 10% wind resistance and also some more magic resistance. So now he can actually, maybe deal with some of the magic users that are running around on a wind team. So when we take a look at the Maelstrom Jet, we're looking at about 4,400 damage, which on a fully built Englebert with over 10k HP, it's not that much. When we take a look at the Splash Shower, we're looking at a little bit less. So what's happening here is when you get to that full spirit penetration, this is with the full spirit penetration, full damage penetration, the 40% buff, what we're seeing is a major drop off compared to Rain because of that lower faith value. So it really does make a big difference. The wind resistance also makes quite a bit of difference. So when we look at this 3,400 damage from Splash Shower, if I take away that wind resistance, we actually go up by about 400 damage. So 10% wind resistance is bringing us 400 HP savings. So if you can build resistance, like for example, if we put 5% on with an Alex ring, that cuts about 200. So that is something that's important to think about. So what's the takeaway here? Basically, Jayden's going to have pretty good damage. But also, if you want to deal with Jayden, then you're going to need to build things like magic barriers, apply shell onto your units, build AoE and single target resistance, and build wind resistance. Now, I did have some requests about doing a comparison to the new 100 cost Glaciella, which is also a wind unit that we'll be getting in the future, and I'm not going to do that in this video because I don't want it to be too long, but I am going to release a second video, which is a comparison, should you pull for Jayden or should you pull for Glaciella, so please look forward to that. Now, if you're wondering, should you be pulling for Jayden, that's a really good question, and I think that he's definitely a great unit. He is a 100 cost unit, and at a certain point, there's only so many units that you can fit into a party, and that's part of the reason that you have to think about him versus the Glaciella unit that will be coming out. Now, Jayden is limited, or semi-limited, I guess, because he'll come back more frequently than other limited units, but still, there's only so many units you can fit in a party, and also so many VC builds that you can fit into a party, so you have to make a decision about whether or not you'd like him. I think that Jayden is a good addition to the Wind cast. He works well with More the Merrier and Sadly, but also units like Corel and Lucia. So there's a lot of viability there in terms of using with other units, but I think that you're still going to want to have Joom as a tank to really hold down the team. That will be an important part about it. So Wind accounts will be happy with Jayden, but I don't think that he's going to be game breaking in any way. Like if you skip him as a Wind account, you're missing out on a good unit and a powerful damage dealer, but you can grab other units in the future like the Wind Glaciella that are going to be very good as well. So it really comes down to where you're at with FFT, with Final Fantasy 13, with any of the other units that you have your eye on. Now, if you're not a Wind account, then I think there is still value here because his TMR is so good. I think that because his innate penetrations are so good on his own, that he does have potential as a rainbow unit, but with his lower magic stat, you do want to compensate with that. So when you have a full Wind team and he gets a bunch of Wind attack up, that does make a difference. So maybe you do want to put him in a mono Wind team, or at least a duo Wind team with a splash of something else. Personally, I'm going to skip him. I think that I'm kind of set in the range department. I think my Wind box isn't as strong as I'd like, and I think the thing that really is holding me off is that I don't have Joom. If I had Joom, I think I'd probably be pulling for Jayden, but the fact that I don't have him, or her, sorry, means that I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to skip. But I'm very curious what your plan is, if you're going to be pulling for him, or maybe by the time this video has come out, you already have. Either way, I think that he is a good unit. I think that everyone's going to be enjoying our first male summer unit. So let's show Gumi some love for once, because that's really nice that they did do that. Otherwise, we're going to see you all in the next video, and also I'll be live streaming tonight at 8 p.m. PDT, so check ya there, and bye.